to get results, because we know that national board writing is a little bit different from any writing that you would ordinarily do. And so we want to make sure you understand the expectation. So the way that this will work, I have a presentation, but then I also have a Padlet where everything from the presentation is housed. And once you open that Padlet, Dr. Hulan is helping me today. She's facilitating, and she is going to put that link to the Padlet in the chat. Once you open that Padlet, you will forever have access to the presentation and all the links that are on that Padlet. So we'll be flipping back and forth between the presentation, the Padlet, and then some shared Google Slides for the breakout rooms. So I'm hoping, I haven't done, I was just telling Dr. Hulan, I have not done 3 sets of Google Slides before, but it's important to me that you guys are actually doing some writing, and it's going to be better for you to do it in a small group. And so that's the route that I took to make that happen. So without any further ado, I am going to get started with sharing the presentation. I am in my hotel room in, where am I? Calera. So you hear a little hum of an air conditioner in the background. I'm sorry about that, but at any rate, we will get started. All right, so as I said, I'm Kelly Lomax. I am a National Board Certified Teacher. First thing I want us to do today, I want you to go to the chat box and I want you to finish this sentence. National Board Writing feels. Okay, so National Board Writing feels. Finish that sentence, just put it in the chat box, and let's see where we are. Just kind of a barometer check for us, see where we are. Oh, yeah, yeah. Overwhelming seems to be the overwhelming response. I will support that. I will PhD level. Okay, so Nadia says it feels like EdTPA. That's absolutely right. That is by design. All right, feels like a lot. Okay, so Cassie says I'm actually done and submitted, just here to see if I did it right. Oh, well, I'm sure you did. And we're not going to think about it. If you have any questions, don't second guess yourself. That's the worst thing. Mount Kilimanjaro. All right, very detailed and specific. All of these are very accurate thoughts. There's no right or wrong answer, obviously. But what I hope for you to gain today is a little more confidence in applying what we're going to learn to your own writing. National Board writing is different, but just like teaching writing in general, there's a formula for it. I learned a long time ago. I was in the classroom for a couple of decades. And like I said, I taught writing, taught ELA, taught everything, but I taught a lot of writing. Now I am teaching at the university level. I'm working with our educator prep students. So future teachers, and I teach writing. And one of the biggest things I have learned is that candidates slash teachers slash students all have one thing in common, and that is it will be difficult for you to teach writing or to do writing if you don't consider yourself a writer. So that is what we're going to do today. We are going to write, and that is what the purpose of those shared slides are. So just you can unmute, or if you want to, this is okay. Let me just pause here. I'm going to ask a lot of questions today because I like participation. So it's really not rhetorical when I'm asking questions. I truly, honestly want you to unmute and respond, or you can put it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. But I'm going to ask a lot of questions just because I want some engagement and I want you to feel like you have a part in this. So the next question on the presentation: which type of writing causes you the most trouble? Just in case you are just brand spanking new, there are 3 types of writing we do with National Board certification. We do descriptive, we do analytical, and we do reflective. So of those 3, which of those 3 do you feel causes you the most trouble? Descriptive, analytical, or reflective. Analytical. One reflective. Yep, 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 yep. Very interesting. Yes, yes. Well, the scholarship app, so Lee, the scholarship app did have a little, it required you to do some of the three types of writing. You may not have known you were doing them, but it's very intentional with matching the types of things you'll be asked to do in the actual components in that scholarship app. um, a descriptive, a very concise writer. So I think that it's safe to say analytical seems to be the biggest challenge for most people. That is actually pretty standard for candidates. The one thing that I will say is that hopefully after this session, you will see that how you analyze and the formula. Like I said, I just really believe in structure with writing. It should not be taught as an abstract concept because that's how we need to teach our students and that's how we need to do it ourselves. So analytical writing is probably the hardest thing that you've done, but more than likely, you have not done a lot of reflective writing. Now, if you have just recently graduated in the last, I think maybe 8 years, maybe 10 years, you may have gone through EdTPA. And EdTPA, it was intentionally created to mirror the process of national board certification. So it's really interesting. Someone said that. It seems like it's EdTPA. That is done intentionally. There are three types of writing. When I'm teaching my college students to prepare for EdTPA, I'm using my national board resources to teach them how to do the three different types of writing. So if you've graduated recently, hopefully you got some good instruction to pass EdTPA and you will be able to get some once you start doing it, you'll begin to see some commonalities there. So thank you for participating in that. So we're going to just jump right in here. You know that when you submit your components, you'll submit, if you're in the upcoming cycle, you'll submit in June, which is crazy talk because since I've done this for 26 years, my work had to be submitted in April, but for as long as I can remember beyond that, it's been May, and now they are having the submission date for this upcoming cycle in June. So what we know is that your work will be submitted and it will be distributed by National Board to an assessor who has been highly trained in assessing National Board writing. So they know how to look for the three types of writing, the evidence to support the writing. They know how to use the rubric, and it's a very specific type of writing that they're looking for. So with that in mind, let's just see where we are. If you are in the presentation, you can click on the link there that says Google Slides link, and that's going to open a Google slide deck there. If you're in the Padlet, it's going to be that column that says Be the Assessor. So in just a moment, we're going to go into breakout rooms and you will be put into a room just randomly. There's no rhyme or reason for that. And let's look at the directions. So the first thing that you're going to do, as is very important in a breakout room, I have been in so many, where for the first, let's say if you have 8 minutes, for the first 3 minutes, the participants just sit with their cameras off and nothing gets done. Has anybody ever been part of that? It's kind of frustrating for me because I like to follow directions. So the very first thing you're going to do is assign roles. There will be 4 roles in our groups, and so there's enough people. We're going to I may have to actually go in. Dr. Houlihan, how many do we have? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. We have about 64 people.
Okay, so I'm going to need to well, I've got 5 slides, so I will just keep it at 5 for the first one and see how that works. So you'll have kind of a large group, but that's okay. So there's only 4 roles, so there'll be people who don't have a role. The facilitator is going to keep the group on task, making sure to review the directions if needed. The recorder is going to do the typing in the shared document. The reporter is going to share out to the whole group. And then the evidence checker, very important role. The evidence checker is going to listen specifically for claims versus evidence and pushes the group to strengthen your response. So let's pause for a moment. Claims versus evidence. So I don't know about you. I really love all of this true crime stuff. I don't love that there's crime, but I love that they tell stories about it. And it promotes a lot of I don't know prediction and things like that, skills that we need to teach our students. A lot of times. And one of the things that we are looking at, we hear a lot of claims from social media, particularly, that something is true when there's no evidence to support it. That is a huge issue in society today. Kids of all ages, adults as well, will just see something on the internet or on social media and just take it to be truth. That's a claim when there's no evidence to support it. So, as you are reading this assignment, what I want you to do is, especially if you're the evidence checker, your group needs to be mindful of the evidence that you're using to support your decision. And that's going to be the case for all of the activities we do today. Once you get in your mind, this is the intent of one of the big intents of this session is that you are very comfortable finding evidence to support every claim you make. So that is a huge, huge part in scoring from a level 4 to a level 3. A level 3, most of the time, will be work that does not provide evidence to support the claims that are being made. So we'll go without any further talk. We need to just dive in. So what you're going to do here, you have 3 different paragraphs. They're not connected. There's 3 columns, 3 paragraphs. You're going to, or the person whose job it is, you're just going to drag the word, drag the word over or under the box that you think is reflective, descriptive, or analytical. Now, mind you, I have not given you any instructions on what those 3 types of writing are. Let's just see what we know. Let's call this a pretest. So once you get into your groups, you will see the room number at the top of your screen. So when you see that room number, you're going to go down the slides on the left, and there's rooms 1 through 5. Oh, we got an extra one there, so I can make that 6. So Dr. Hulan, we can do 6 rooms. Did that mess you up?
Nope, I can
Okay.
recreate them. Hold on just a
Okay.
second.
All right. So all 6 rooms have the same 3 passages. All you're doing in your group is discussing which of the 3 passages is which type of writing, but you also must have evidence to support your claim. So the person who's reporting, when we come back to the group, you will need to not just tell us the answer, but tell us why your group chose that particular type of writing for that paragraph. You're going to have 8 minutes to do this, so not a whole lot of time. And then we'll come back together and do some sharing. Does anybody have questions or anything I can clarify? I'm going to be popping in the rooms to see if you have any questions or anything. You can just let us know. It'll let you come back to the main room if you have questions. And I think there was a feature of raising your hand.
How do
Okay.
we know which room we're in? Oh,
Once
okay,
you
there you go.
okay, yeah, it'll say like Stephanie Hulan is inviting you to join room 3.
Okay.
Okay, so I need to go make some more rooms real quick. I mean, slides real quick. Let me do that, and that'll change the number. So there's 60, 64.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So,
Can I help anyone in the room get to a breakout room? I know sometimes a message pops up and sometimes it doesn't. So just let me know if I can help in any way.
okay, I'm doing 10 rooms for the other two sets. When I did this, I have um, all right, as everyone is coming back, thank you very much for participating in that activity. I heard some great conversations, some good words. And you're given, if you finish with your assignment in your room, I would love for you to just start getting to know each other. One of the biggest I don't know, superpowers of National Board teachers is that we are huge collaborators and networkers. And I was just telling Dr. Hulan about some people I have met through National Board from all over the country. And so when like minds get together, it's always fun to make connections. And you may find someone who might be doing the same certification that you're doing, and maybe you have some questions or you could help others if you've submitted, start talking about components that you may have submitted so that you might could provide some guidance for people who haven't submitted that component. Maybe they have a particular question. So please do make use of that time that you have in those rooms. So, all right, I'm going to just randomly call here. Let's see, I've got my screen on room 3. So if room 3 can, your reporter can unmute and tell us about the paragraph that you labeled and your evidence.
I was in room three. I'm Collins. We was able to we highlighted words that very stuck out to where we could separate between analytical, descriptive, and reflective, and we talked about how those keywords help us identify what type of writing was in each paragraph.
Yeah, yeah. I like how in the analytical you highlighted the first sentence, misconceptions revealed in the formative assessment. That's giving the assessor the knowledge that you're not just pulling this information out of the air, you actually have a physical piece of evidence in that formative assessment that you are using to guide your analytical writing. That is a tremendous use of evidence there. So even just that little sentence is enough to qualify that as analytical writing with evidence versus just a claim. The claim would be I provided targeted instruction and to my students. That's just a claim. You're just saying something that you did. But the way that that's written there, according to the misconceptions revealed in the formative assessment, it allowed me to provide targeted instruction instead of reviewing skills that many students already mastered. So yeah, thank you very much, room three. Let's hear from room five. The room five reporter, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and tell me about your descriptive paragraph.
I was in room five. We talked, it was very specific. It was a third grade classroom, 22 students, four flexible groups based on formative assessment, and then talked about what each station was going to have, how they were going to rotate through it.
Excellent. And that what you said to start out your sentence is exactly right. It's very specific and descriptive. Anything that you notice, anybody can answer this. Looking at that paragraph, is there anything that you noticed about the descriptive paragraph compared to the analytical or reflective paragraph? The analytical and the
Numbers.
reflective doesn't have this.
Numbers.
Yes, exactly. Numbers. That's where you're really going to list details. When you're doing your instructional context form, you don't even have to put things in sentences. What the assessor is going to be looking for is information just like this, except you don't. If you were my candidate, I would first tell you to take all the words out and use the numbers instead because that's real estate. We want to use the least amount of space on the descriptive writing because the descriptive writing it's laying the foundation and building the background, but really the meat is going to be in your analytical and reflective writing. So your descriptive writing doesn't need to be a whole page of just facts and facts and facts and facts and facts. Give what the question is asking for and nothing more. Here's one thing to keep in your head. There are no bonus points for adding more. You don't get extra points for saying, if they ask you to describe the number of students in your class and you say that you have 25 students, which is a lot of students compared to the other classes who only have 20 and 22 students, it makes it difficult for me to differentiate how I need to. After the sentence, after the phrase, I have 25 students, everything else would be superfluous information that you don't need that. That is one big thing that Bobby Faulkner states constantly. If you don't know Bobby Faulkner, you will. Bobby Faulkner is I call her Yoda. She's like the OG professional development leader she lives in Arizona, but she is all over the country. We've had her in Alabama several times. She is the author of the books that we distribute through, I think, the whole state. I think every region is using those books now to provide for their candidates. But one of the things that she says that I had to get out of and I have to coach candidates out of, subject verb. When you're writing, when we teach writing, when we're teaching students, we sometimes, especially if we're secondary, we want to get into the depth of writing with all of the different devices, the figurative language, the adjectives and adverbs and phrases. When you're writing for National Board, it literally is subject verb. None of that other stuff, unless it's relevant to what you're describing and you're talking about, none of that other stuff is even necessary. That is probably one of the biggest shifts from your current state of writing to where you're going to head as a writer for National Board. Subject verb, we don't need all the prepositional phrases to start our sentences. We don't need all of the adjectives. One of the things that is similar to doctoral writing is we don't want emotion in our writing. Passion is different from emotion. For example, I can have a paragraph, like look at the analytical paragraph that's showing here, misconceptions revealed in the formative assessment. Perhaps I've really worked hard teaching those misconceptions and they still missed it despite my best efforts. And those are the words that I use in my writing. Well, that's going to come across very negatively to an assessor, and we don't want to do that. An assessor is a person who can be swayed. We are taught not to be swayed. That's a whole different thing in your PLF training. Once you're certified and become a mentor, you're taught to be ethical and support without bias. But if I've got a lot of emotion in my writing, if I'm doing my instructional context and I'm talking about my school, which is a struggling school that's been on the state list since its inception. Despite our best efforts, we can't get it off the list. And if I'm talking about my school like that to someone I don't know, that's really going to paint a very negative picture of my school, which is not what a national board teacher is going to do. We are going to meet our students where they are. We're going to do the very best we can to bring them up to where they should be. So that is one big thing with this writing. All three types of writing is you've got to remove the emotion, remove the extra fluff, where you are stating the fact and providing the evidence. So that's the formula, by the way. That's just a preview. You answer the question, you state the fact, which is also the claim, and you provide the evidence. Answer the question, make the claim, provide the evidence. Every sentence you write is that same formula. And if it doesn't fall into that, or you don't have evidence to support that claim, guess what? You're not going to use it. So we're going to continue on, but this is a very important notice there that all the numbers in the descriptive that are not in the reflective and analytical. Whatever you need to say about numbers, do say it when you are doing that descriptive writing. All right, let's go to room 6. Tell us about the reflective paragraph, whoever the reporter is for that.
Okay, we chose words like reflecting, reviewing in future lessons because it's clear that we're talking about what, we could have done differently. It could have been quicker, or like it was quicker than anticipated, things like that.
Yes, exactly. Anybody can answer this. What do you notice about the tenses in the paragraph for reflective writing?
All future.
Is it?
Present tense.
Is it?
Multi-tense.
Multi-tense. There we go. It's multi-tense. So look at the first sentence. After reviewing the student work and reflecting on the lesson, I realized, so that's past tense. Before we can think about what we would do differently, we have to think about what we did and whether or not it worked. And this is the kind of detail that comes around when you start editing. When you start just writing to get your work on paper, you're not really thinking about tenses, but when you're editing, you do need to think about whether your work is easy to read. Is it easy? Does it flow? If you're jumping around present, past tense, and future and all that, if you're doing that and the assessor can't tell what you did when, well, that's not gonna bear well on your score. However, when you're writing reflectively, you will be switching from past tense to future tense. What you did, because that is reflection, looking back, but then what you would do differently. If I had to say what you would do differently is the one thing I walked away from 26 years ago that I never did prior to that I have done since then. because I did not sit down and think about my lessons. What would I have done differently? What could work with this student that didn't work from what I taught? I really truly believe that's what makes an effective, accomplished teacher. So looking back at the beginning of your reflection and then looking forward to say what you would do differently. So just to review here, analytical was the first one, and we've got the evidence there for the formative assessment. And then there was, let's see, another word I saw there, resulting in. So that's giving you the end game of what your strategy was. What difference did it make? So that's a big question. I have a list of questions that I ask my candidates to put near their computer as they're writing, so that they through every sentence, again, we don't want to put more than what we should, but we also don't want to miss an opportunity to expand on our thinking. I would rather know what difference it made than something negative about my school, like I said earlier. So yeah, so any questions about that? These are correct as they were labeled.
Is the list of questions that you said you want your candidates to reference when writing, is that in your Padlet?
It is.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
yes, yes. All right, let me get out of this. Okay, so let's go now to some instruction. See what this is all about. Okay. Here we are. So one of the things that you will see in every certificate area, in every rubric, and in every set of instructions are these three words here: clear, concise, convincing. So that for a level 4 rubric. If you compare a level 4 and a level 3, most of the time the word that you will see over and over again is clear. However, the word concise and convincing are typically not after level 4. They're usually only reserved for level 4 because that's where our writing is set apart. So concise, just for the matter of definition, what does concise mean? Somebody unmute and tell me.
To the point.
To the point, yes, yes, very good. So to the point. So let's go back to what I've already said. We don't have room in our writing to put a lot of extra information. So we need very much to make sure that our writing is concise and that it's not repeating itself. One of the things I hear a lot from candidates is sometimes the prompts seem like they're repeating each other, repetitive, and that you're writing the same thing over and over. If you feel that way, you need to pause for a moment and compare, like pull up on a document both of the prompts that you're saying are too similar, so that you can compare what's different and what's being asked. There's never anything written verbatim. Sometimes your writing is going to start with a reflection, an analysis, and then it may seem to repeat in the reflective part, but it's not. It's asking you, don't tell me what you did, tell me what you'll do differently. You see? So if you look at what you're being asked to do, that's where the concise comes in. You're not just copying and pasting from one prompt to another prompt. I've had candidates do that. Just because they weren't looking at the lens at which they were being asked to write from, and that really makes a big difference whenever you're writing. Sometimes when you're in the weeds and the muck and the mire of this writing, it does seem to repeat itself, but you need to back out and look at the content of the section that you're being asked to write on and see, is it really identical? I'm using the same information, but it's going to be using that as evidence to support the claim that I'm making. So it will be different when it's all said and done. And then the last C is convincing. What does it mean to convince somebody of something?
To persuade.
Yeah, persuade. So Bobby Faulkner talks about a national board candidate is very similar to an attorney. You have a case that you're trying to win, and you have collected the guess what evidence to support your case. And then you go before a judge, aka assessor, and you have to convince that assessor that you have answered the prompt with your claim and your evidence. And it has to be written with that kind of confident voice. So that convincing, it's not talking me into it. It's not talking your coworker into it. It's talking a complete stranger who may be in California as your assessor. So you have to be as descriptive as you can be without too much fluff while analyzing using your claim and your evidence, and then telling how what you did and what you would do differently, all within the same scope of an assignment or unit. So keeping that in mind, that convincing voice. A lot of times, we start walking through things and maybe our students don't do well on component 2 specifically. Component 2 is focused on differentiation. Different and most certificates, just as in a nutshell, you'll have an area of need for your students. You'll develop a unit to differentiate for your students. Then you'll do some other kind of assessment to show growth. What if your students don't grow? Does that mean that you should quit? No, that means that you should talk about why you think they didn't grow. If you're focused on some certificates ask for a group of students, some ask for one student, some ask for two, whatever your certificate is, you're still talking about a human, right? And you could be the most fabulous teacher in the whole wide world, but if that human has a bad day on the day that you give that assessment or is absent or whatever the case may be, that is out of your control. What's in your control is to talk about what you did in front of that student while they were able to do the learning that was required. So that's your convincing writing. You've got to be able to say in component 2, well, my students didn't grow, or my student didn't grow like I anticipated. Here's what I did. Here's why I did it. That's where your evidence comes from and your research-based resources. Here's why I did it. Here's what I might do differently to see if it makes an impact. You're not trying to hide that your student didn't grow, and you're not covering it up. You're not saying, well, it must have been the kid's fault. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what you did, why you did it, what was the result, what would you do differently. So that's kind of this framework for component 2. So let's talk about those 3 types of writing. Descriptive writing, you see there, short to the point, information about your class, instruction, demographics, etc. Again, this is not where you talk about all the bad things. Our school has no parent participation. We have a terrible absentee rate. You're not putting those types of adjectives in to describe the demographics. If if attendance is a problem at your school, you can definitely include that, but you're stating a fact. According to our power schools, our attendance rate is whatever it is, period. You don't say we have a terrible attendance rate. You don't say our students don't come to school. You just state the fact, and then you can put where you got that information. Making sure that I always tell candidates, if you imagine if your classroom has a window in the door, most of them do, you're writing so that your assessor can peek through the window of your classroom and get a gist of what's going on just by observation. So you have to write with enough detail, but you also can't put too much. It's a fine line. I realize that. So just understanding that description is there to lay the foundation, build the background, and give the assessor an idea of what a day in your world looks like. Okay. Analytical, we have some questions that that your analytical writing will answer, such as so what and why, and what difference does it make, and how does this impact student learning? So I tell my candidates, I told you about the list of questions, but they also have several things that I ask my candidates to keep handy. One of the other things is on anywhere where you're teaching, on your laptop, at the front of your room, in your plan, whatever you use for plans, write down, does this impact student learning? Because if what you're doing does not impact student learning, you should not be doing it. And then if you say yes, then your next question is what? How? Does this impact student learning, and how? Those are the things, everything that you design to complete your, really to do your daily world in teaching, but specifically for National Board components, everything is designed around impact on student learning. Everything. So giving them a worksheet to color, that's going to be adding 2-digit numbers and it makes a puzzle or whatever. Did that impact their learning? Probably not. So just really use that question to weigh out the instructional decisions that you're making as you're continuing to go through this process and complete your components. I always tell people, regardless of the outcome of your national board journey, some people find that it's too much and they don't finish. Some people just, their life is not at the point where they can finish. Some people just get really frustrated with the process. But no matter what, taking the time to go through these types of questions is going to change your journey as a teacher, and it's going to impact students, even if you don't finish the process. Keep that in mind as you're going through this. This is going to shift your perspective and your paradigm in the decisions that you make about what you teach and how you teach it and why you teach it. So this analytical writing is going to help you with that. Analytical is, again, where you're using that formula. Answer the question, state the claim, here's the evidence. There's a framework for writing that we use sometimes. I see it a lot more in science, but I use it in ELA: claim, evidence, and reasoning. So it's kind of the same type of writing, CER. If you don't know about that, you could look it up. Just to kind of see what that's doing. You're stating a fact, you're providing, that's your claim, you're providing the evidence, and then you're telling why that made a difference. Same kind of writing. And then finally, we have reflective. So reflective is going to ask, now what? This writing is done after you teach your lesson or do whatever it is you're doing, so that you can take a moment to think back on what happened and then what you would do in the future. I always advise candidates when they're doing, particularly when you're in the heat of the moment of writing, take some time after you teach these lessons to just jot down some notes on a Post-it note or somewhere that you can go back and look at it while it's fresh in your mind. Because if you don't, if you're teaching, 6 classes and you teach your lesson for component 2 in first period, you may not remember some of the really important details that you need to remember to include in your writing. So take some notes, there's a lot of different resources out there of organizers and templates to get your thoughts. And in my other session tomorrow, I'm going to share some of that. So those resources there, you can just Google it. I mean, there's just so many different things. So just make sure that you have time in your day to take some notes. All right. Speaking of clear, concise, and convincing, these are the 3 books that I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you get if you don't have them already. These are Bobby Faulkner's books. She actually has more books, but these are the 3 that I recommend. These are the 3 that our Regional In-Service Center gives all of our candidates. So the first one there is on components 1 and 2. The second one is on components 3 and 4. And then the third one is just on writing. The biggest nugget that you can get from these books, she gives, first of all, they're very small books. I'm saying less than 100 pages. But she's very concise when she's writing. She doesn't do a lot of beating around the bush or fluffy stuff or telling stories or anything like that. She gives you what you're looking for. But the big golden nugget that you get out of these books is she gives sentence starters. As a teacher for a long time, I was not a fan of sentence starters. I just thought, my students are older, they shouldn't need sentence starters. Well, that could not be further from the truth, because when I provide them, the writing that I get is so much better because they're not having to stare at a blank page. It's kind of like when you teach a student how to do an outline or a graphic organizer. Helping them to do that providing them with a template of sentence starters is going to make it so much easier for them to get started. The same is true for you. And that's what she provides for you in these books. So if you don't have these books, highly, highly recommend. All right. So enough of me talking. Let's do a little more writing. So this time we're going to go to the Padlet. Okay. So the Padlet, there's a title called Route to School. I want you to think about how you get to school. Now, I realize it's July. You hopefully have not been at school in a few weeks, but you're going to be going back soon. So think about that. Think about what route you take when you go to school. Why do you choose that route? And would you take that route again? If so, why? If not, why not? So let me get to the Padlet so I can show you a little bit more of what that's going to look like. So we are actually on route to school on this column here. So these are the things that I just read. And here's and there's a few more directions here. Describe the route you took to drive to school. Be very specific. Help someone visualize your route in detail. Explain why you took this route, talk about other options you had, and explain why this was your choice. Now write about what you do if you had to drive to school using the same route. Explain why you'd make that decision. So what I'd like to invite you to do, you can click on this plus sign here under the comment, or you can just click, I think if you click on post, that's going to take it over to the side. So click on this plus sign under that column and just give me some thoughts there. Make sure if you're not signed in to the Padlet, it's going to just have you as anonymous. So put your name in it as you start doing your assignment, your writing. Okay, so we're going to take about 10 minutes to do this. Okay, so 10 minutes, not a lot of time. Once you get here to the Padlet, we're on route to school. And actually you can click this plus sign. And that's what you should do. Okay, so click on this plus sign that's under route to school. That's going to put your comment here under the column after the instructions. All right, so there's your prompt. I told you we're going to be doing some writing. So here we are, writing assignment number 2. We have about 10 minutes, so I'm going to set the timer on my phone and you get started. Does anybody have questions? Anybody not see where we are? Okay, I'll get started. Have about 3 minutes and 15 seconds to put your response on the Padlet. I'm enjoying reading some of your routes and your rationale. All right, wrapping up in the last few seconds here. Finish whatever sentence you are on. So one thing I'm noticing, everybody got started. Well, I say a good many got started immediately. But then there was some hesitation. There was like a lull where there was nobody posting. And I feel like that, this when I've done this activity in the past, we don't typically take time to think through our route because it's sort of a muscle memory situation. But the way that some of you have described your route and the reasons for taking that route, there's some people who live 30 minutes away and have to get on 280, which God bless you. Um, I, I just, wow, that's a lot. And then there's people from my area, I'm from Mobile, who, try to avoid the heavier traffic areas. That's a big part of it, is you try to avoid traffic. But one thing I'm noticing consistently is everyone, as far as I can tell, just glancing, everyone answered the prompt, each part of the prompt. So I want to go back and look at how this prompt is set up, because this is how a prompt is set up for National Board. And it was done intentionally because this is the way you need to become familiar with the way that National Board does their prompts. On the if those of you who receive the scholarship is also set up in a similar way, where it has multiple questions in a prompt that are required for you to answer. So let's take a look here. So first of all, I gave you the lens at which you would be writing. Think about the route you take to get to school. So the first question, what route did you take? That's very broad. And some people did a turn by turn. Some people gave a little bit more description about what you're seeing, landmarks, and that's how I drive, not necessarily directions. Some people went so far as to, you back out of the driveway, very, very detailed. There's no right or wrong here. What I want you to look for in that first part of that sentence, go to your post and see if you put any information that wasn't part of you driving. For example, um, uh, there's a lot, there are a lot of cars between a lot of traffic between here and point B, and I don't like traffic. It makes me nervous and my anxiety goes through the roof. That part right there is not part of responding to the question. So that's what we have to be really careful about. What it asks is, think about the route you took to school. What route did you take? So then that whole section there should be just describing the route that you took. Now, the next question is, why did you choose that route? That could very well be because any other route is, or really that's going to come later, but any other route that causes you anxiety, that's going to be why you don't take a different route. So the placement of the answering of the questions is very important. I also want you to look, because I gave you a little more information, and this, so under the actual prompt, I gave more information on the prompt. If you've looked at your directions, oftentimes you'll see a gray box around the questions, the prompts, or around directions or something like that. For some reason, it is our nature to skip the gray box. The gray box has lots of important information. So make it a habit to make sure that you are reading everything that's in that gray box. What I did on this next part, that would be like the gray box. Describe the route you took to drive to school. Be very specific. It didn't say that in the original prompt. And then it also didn't say this, help someone visualize your route in detail. So if someone wrote about landmarks, that would mean that they wrote that. If someone put street names, that would mean that they read that, because it's helping that assessor to visualize. I can look for a street sign that matches what you wrote. I can look for a landmark that matches what you wrote. You're helping the assessor to actually see what it is you're trying to write about. And then so what type of writing have we done so far in the first two sentences? Describe the route you took, be specific, help someone visualize. What type of writing is that?
Descriptive.
Descriptive. Excellent. So then the next part, explain why you took this route, talk about other options you had, and explain why this was your choice. So that's actually got some analysis and some reflection in that question. So the first thing is why you took this route. That's analysis. Why did you make this decision? Other options you had, that may be a little bit of reflecting, or it may connect to analysis as well, depending on how you frame it. But then explain why this was your choice. That's 100% analysis. So then you're going to write that. Then the last one is now write about what you'd do if you had to drive to school again using the same route. Explain why you'd make that decision. So in other words, you're taking the same route every single day. Sometimes when I'm driving to school, I go different ways for absolutely no reason other than I just want to go a different way. It's not shorter sometimes. Sometimes there's a traffic issue, but most of the time it's the same way as far as mileage. I just go a different way. If that's something that you did, that you included, that would be an important thing to distinguish that makes you different from every other teacher who may be submitting that component. I'm making some correlations here with components and writing how you get to work. So look back at your writing for just a moment and think about, read it and see if there's anything that you can eliminate that was not part of the prompt. So if there is, if you wouldn't mind sharing, just tell me what you put that you think you could eliminate.
I could definitely eliminate that. That I imagine a beautiful house that I see on my drive is such a big house that it looks like a compound that probably has sister wives.
But there's something like that would be memorable, but no, you don't want to include it. You don't
Exactly.
want to
That's what
include
I
I
want
was
it.
to
gonna
be
say,
memorable. I'm funny. I want them
I'd
to see
read the
that.
book.
I mean, those are the kinds of things, if we have space, we might put it in there. But honestly, when I'm reading a candidate's writing, I have the prompts pulled up or the candidate has left the prompts in their documents. And I'm looking at the prompts to see that everything that they have written is relative to the prompts. As teachers, and this is not our fault, as teachers, we write in a narrative frame of reference. We are telling a story. Everything that we do is telling a story. We are telling, if you have to do a reference for special education referral, you are writing a narrative. If you have to do, if you write to a parent, you are giving a narrative. All of the, yes, I love it, Brittany. We're certified yappers, 100%. So we always include some extra information. Why do we include extra information? Because we think that other people need it in order to get the context that we're trying to say to convey. That there's nothing wrong with that, and you don't have to change that, except for when you're writing for national board, because that narrative, nowhere in these three types of writing do you hear narrative. There's no narrative writing in national board writing. It is descriptive at the beginning, and then once you get that demographic situation settled, you're all analytical and reflective. There's no room for adding your thoughts about your opinions, things like that. That is one of the hardest things to get out of, because as teachers, we are very accustomed to giving our opinion about why things work, why they don't. You're stating what you think, but only if you have the evidence to back it up. So I think this strategy would work next year, because um, I have read an article about it working with a school similar to mine or something to that degree, not necessarily that example, but you've got to have the evidence to back up every single claim that you make. It's not just you stating your opinion, even though we know that as accomplished teachers, we have the authority and expertise to, we do things automatically from our guts because we're good teachers. We've hardly taken the time to sit down and really write about what we're doing and why. We are just telling a story about it. So it's a shift in your paradigm, and that's really the biggest part. Once you get that shift kind of seated in your writing, things start to flow a little bit better. So thank you for participating in that. That's just a quick little connection to doing those three types of writing. And I think that the biggest thing that we see is we unintentionally include more information than what we need, and that's okay. That's really okay. So going back to the types of writing, descriptive writing, route did you take? That's descriptive. It responds to the prompts such as state, list, describe, what, and which. Those are the words you can look for to be your clue as to doing descriptive writing. You're looking for those particular words, not just those words, but those are the words that you'll definitely see. And then you see an example over on the right. Once again, if this were my candidate, the very first thing I would say is to make all those number words into actual numbers, because that takes up space. Um, there's things that we can do. This is kind of a side note about the writing. There's things that we can do to shorten our writing, because 9 times out of 10, right now, if you're at the beginning of your journey and it says you got to write 12 pages, you're thinking, I'm never going to write 12 pages. More than likely, you will, if you answer the prompts completely, you'll have way more than 12 pages, and you'll have to get someone to help you cut it down, probably. I love doing that. That's kind of my other jam. So things like using an ampersand. Here's just some little tips for you. Everything you know about formal writing kind of goes out the window with National Board, because they want you to get your thoughts on paper. For example, you do not have to use paragraphs in your writing. You can make one big, and your very first sentence doesn't have to be indented. One big long paragraph that's 12 pages long. That's against every grain in my body. All of this is, but you know, it's just what we do. You must stay within that 1 inch margin, but you can write from line to line, end to end, without any paragraphs at all. Another tip for saving space, a lot of times candidates will restate the question. That is not anything that you need to do. What we advise is you take the first 3 words or so of the prompt and you put them, I mean, of your response, and you put them in bold print so that it's obvious to the assessor that you're shifting to a new response. So if the response tells you, if the prompt tells you that you need to, what instructional strategy did you use to differentiate for your students? You would start with bold print. I used turn and talk for my group. The first 3 words would be put in bold print. You don't have to say, I used blank instructional strategy. You don't have to restate the question because that's taking up real estate. As I've already mentioned, you can use some shortcuts like using numbers instead of words. You can use a capital and uppercase T for teachers, an uppercase S for students. The first time that you use it, you type out the word and then you put in parentheses the uppercase T, and then you don't have to explain it anymore. We're going to look at a sample in just a minute that kind of overdoes that. So you'll see what not to do. But using abbreviations, a lot of times people will do that a little too much. I should, if I'm helping you and you're using abbreviations, I should not have to scroll back to the first time that you use that abbreviation to figure out what it means. Like it should be a common enough abbreviation. Again, you know, you kind of have to get into it. This is when you get to the editing part, but just some little tips that we know about writing when you're having to do this much, putting this much into a limited number of pages. So the analytical is, why did you choose that route? Analytic writing responds to prompts such as how, why, and in what ways. You can see there that example. That's a really strong example of an analytical response. I could definitely cut some words out of it if I needed to make it shorter. For example, with, you can use a W and a slash to take out to use for with. There's another, you know, ones, then using the Arabic number. But if you look at how the sentences are written, it as I said, it is subject verb. They're not starting out with in my classroom because we already know it's in your classroom. They're not starting out with opinion. They don't have opinions, things like that. Using quantitative words like very. I am very excited to teach this lesson. You don't have to use quantitative words like that. The fact that you're doing it should be enough for the assessor. And then we have reflective writing. Would you take that route again? That was the writing that you just did. You're thinking about how well something worked. All 3 of the portfolio components, 2, 3, and 4, have reflective writing, all 3 of them, but it's looking through a different lens according to what the focus of the component is. So make sure that you are looking at that reflection, even though it seems like you've already said it, you haven't, because they're asking you to reflect. Reflective writing responds to what was successful, what would you do differently, and why. And there's you an example of a good writing. You know, again, I'm a big subject verb person when I'm reading as a mentor. That first sentence, I would start with the several still struggled, and I'd rearrange it to combine that sentence in a different way, just to follow that very expected, predictable pattern. In the chat, yes, you can use an ampersand. Isn't that funny? Each component needs to be 12 pages, 1-inch margin. Please read your instructions for your certificate. There are different numbers of pages according to the certificate. I just use 12 because that's for literacy, and I do a lot of literacy mentoring. So just read your instructions. Okay, so now that we understand, a little bit about the types of writing that you're going to do, descriptive, analysis, and reflective, we're going to do a breakout room where you will have a passage. Each group, this is another set of Google Slides. If you want to keep the same roles, you can, or you can switch them up. It's up to you. But I'd like for you to highlight or make the words blue for the descriptive writing, green for the analytical writing, and yellow for the reflective writing. So let me click and open them so we can see what they look like. On the second slide, here are your directions with the colors that you are to use. And every group has the same passage. So whatever you think, and you can either highlight it or you can change the color of the font. So whatever you think is descriptive, you're going to highlight blue. Whatever is analytical, you'll highlight green. And whatever is reflective, you'll highlight yellow. All right, so Dr. Hulan is going to open the breakout rooms. This is going to be about 8 minutes for you to work in your groups. Does anyone have questions? Okay, all right, so we will open the groups and I'll pop into the rooms and see how you're doing.
Dr. Lomax, I just want to make sure we have 10 rooms. Is that correct?
10 rooms, yes.
Okay.
Oh, so you won't be with the same group that you were before, excuse me. So you need to do those roles again. I did on the other 2 sets of slides, I made it 10 rooms so we could have smaller groups. So you will need to reassign those roles once you get into your room. Thank you for that, Dr. Hulan. All right, as everyone's coming back, are we coming back now? Yes, okay, yes. All right, so as I was popping into the rooms, I did notice that there was a lot of conversation on this one. Is there more time? Oh, okay, they're coming. There it is. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I was talking away and you guys weren't all back yet. So I did notice when I popped into the rooms that there was a lot more conversation with this. This was a little more challenging. anybody, just any one who wants to, looking back at the slides, which sentence did you think was most challenging? Which was the most challenging to determine which mode of writing it was?
There's one that really is both. That's kind of analytical and reflective. The as I circulated.
That was the one I was going to say as well. Yeah.
I also thought sentence number 3 could had a small portion of the descriptive and then some analytical. I thought it covered 2 areas.
Okay. Most people, when we do this paragraph, agree that sentence 5 is it could be a little bit of both, like you said. That's the one that as I circulated, because it gives a little bit of reflection and a little bit of analysis. And guess what? That is perfectly fine. I hope that you don't leave here today with the idea that you must write each sentence in one particular mode of writing, because that is not the point. If you are writing in the way that a national board teacher writes, you will have sentences interwoven from all 3 of the types of writing. That's just how we write. And just like you said, the one that said had a little bit of the description in it. So when you're writing in your sentence with your thoughts in mind of the 3 types of writing, it is very acceptable to have a sentence that has descriptive because you're telling what happened, that has analysis because you're telling why it mattered, and that has reflection because you're going to tell what you do next. If you write each one of, like, the intent is not to have a descriptive paragraph and then a reflective, an analytical paragraph, and then a reflective paragraph. It's supposed to be woven in, just like if you picked up any kind of textbook or book, you will find yourself looking at this now that you know, to see what type of writing, and hardly ever is a good piece of writing just one type of writing. It's using all of the types of writing. The key comes in to when you write too much. So that's when we're putting too much of one and not enough of the other. That's when we have too much description, and we certainly don't want that. So as you've already told me at the very beginning, analysis, you agree that that is probably the most challenging to write when you're doing this from a national board perspective, a candidate perspective, because if you bring it in to really describing, or not, let me not use that word, to explaining what you're doing, your analysis is what happened, and then why it happened. So if you think about those questions repeatedly, I think that you'll find it's a lot easier to write if you're not thinking about the word analytical, but rather what happened, why it happened. Okay, so we're going to move on, move back to our presentation, just because we're at a good transition with where we're headed here. Because what we started with way back at the beginning, we talked about evidence versus claims. So what you have here in the presentation, you have 3 different examples of writing that someone could easily use, and they have 3 very different results. For example, I used multiple types of assessments in each of my units. That's not going to be enough to get the score that you want, because you are simply saying that you did something. You're not being descriptive about what you did. You're not being analytical about why you did it. You're not providing any evidence as to what happened. You're just saying, you're making a claim. There's no evidence. Then we get a little more general. We do list in the next one, we list 3 different strategies, but we don't give any evidence to support them. We don't tell what happened as a result of them. We don't tell the impact on student learning. In this unit, I use KWL, exit notes, and a culminating performance. And if I were reading this as as a mentor out beside it or in the comments of your Google Doc, I would write, so what? and I have to tell my candidates what that means. I'm not being derogatory or smart aleck. I just really, really, really want you to notice, answer that question. So what? Why did you put that sentence in here? What difference does it make that you put that sentence in here? I saw a question pop up in the chat. Yes, you can use student names in writing. You cannot use last names. In fact, I would much rather read as a mentor, I would much rather read names as opposed to student A or some kind of acronym that you give your student or initials or whatever. I've had candidates do that and I'm having to try and keep up with who's what and all that. Yes, absolutely, you can use first names, only first names. And then you have that last one that's specific, and you can read that on your own. But look at what is the difference between the global and the specific. You're doing at the beginning of the unit. So when did it happen? You're talking about what you did with that KWL chart. Then you're telling about some impact. Here's the big kicker: impact it had on Kaylee, Cedric, and Landon. Okay, so you're mentioning specific students that were impacted by this strategy that you chose. Then you're talking about the unit throughout the unit using the exit notes to gauge daily progress toward the goals. So that's another strategy, what you did with it and why you did it. And then it gives some more information about another student who doesn't participate in class but responds well in writing. The culminating role play, so you've got that culminating performance, was uncomfortable at first, but for some students. Then you've got the really great thing for an assessor to see you know what you're doing. Look at those next two words. For example, those next two words are telling the assessor the next thing that you read should be a specific thing that you did in relation to that instructional strategy, or in relation, this is what's following, for example, should be evidence. Okay, so understanding that using the phrase for example is a really great way to cue the assessors what comes next should be evidence. And then that last sentence, it's giving the impact on student learning in the the whole picture there. Sorry, I was distracted for a minute. The planning and performing, most students saw the value of displaying their knowledge in various ways. Okay, question too generic. You would definitely need to add more to that, just because what are the various ways is what I would say if I were providing feedback as a mentor. What ways? When I provide feedback, hardly ever do I make a statement. Most of my feedback is going to be questions like, what difference does it make? So what? Why? Tell me more, something like that. So these are the things that, and then I've already answered the question, which sentences would convince an assessor? That, for example, is gold. Just make sure. Now, don't overuse it. And there's other things that you can use besides, for example, to cue up evidence. And look, lo and behold, I have something for you. This is actually as a resource on the Padlet. This came from Bobby Faulkner's book. This is what I mean by sentence stems. This is, to me, the most valuable thing that I got from her books. Go back to when they were published, and I was using them as a mentor. I used them in my elementary grade classes to start. I use them in my graduate work. I use them in my dissertation. I use them to teach my college students. This is gold right here. This is amazing because it helps you to phrase what you're saying so that what follows is coming from you and you know how to frame whatever it is that you're trying to say. So that's available for you on the Padlet, but this is what I'm talking about with sentence stems. It is just going to make such a difference when you sit down and write. If you have this printed out beside your computer, because it's going to just really help you with that different types of writing. So the first thing you would do is look at your prompt and you would determine, okay, what are they asking me for? Is it description? Is it analysis? Or is it reflection? And then you're going to go to that appropriate column so that you can respond appropriately. Okay. All right. big thing here. We're doing great on time, but this is huge. I intentionally saved it for now because artificial intelligence is here and it's not going anywhere. In the middle of a cycle last year, March, the National Board released a policy on the use of artificial intelligence for writing, and you need to know about that policy. So I'm going to go to the Padlet, the column that says AI and NB writing. The first thing that you see there is the document, the actual document from National Board. Read it carefully. Read it carefully. This has got the links into it about where you'll find all this, but I want to focus particularly on this chart. What is AI? What can AI be used for? And this it doesn't just include like just ChatGPT. Grammarly is a form of AI. Word correction thing, that's a form of, if anything is providing you with information or answers or whatever, it is considered artificial intelligence. So you can spell check and use grammar, grammar check, that's allowable, that's okay. AI may be used for translating or transcribing student work samples that the students created themselves in a language other than English. However, candidates should check their work for accuracy after translation is complete. That's a big one because we use Google Translate a lot when we work with our ESL students. Now look over on the right. AI may not be used to draft or write any part of the written commentary or any forms. You are responsible for describing, analyzing, and reflecting on your own practice. Generating evidence, including assessment data, videos, or student work samples. So, and this is important, it's further down here. You can use AI to generate a formative assessment, but you cannot use AI to generate the data. Like you can't feed all your stuff in there and say, create the data for me. Okay, you've got to do that data analysis yourself. It seems obvious to me, but you can't use it to generate student work samples. Just be careful about that. Obtain feedback. Now, this is big. I have advised that what's in bold print there. I have advised candidates for the last several years because when you take component one, there are not a lot of resources to prepare for it. There are some commercial products online from Amazon. We, as a regional in-service center, do not promote any one thing. Our advice is that you go to the National Board website, you look at the resources there, and you go to Pearson. But then I heard this great idea, put the Pearson questions into artificial intelligence and say, generate 10 more using this format. Well, that's a no-no. In bold print there, it says, under no circumstances may you or others upload, submit, or otherwise provide your component submissions, so you can't put your whole component in, including component one content knowledge, for any purpose, including but not limited to obtaining feedback, generating scores, or attempting to improve your assessment scores. So you can't put it in, you can't put your component into AI and say, give me feedback. Can't do that. You can't go in and say, generate questions for me to study component one. This is just really important. They'll take your certificate. They're pretty serious about this. So it just needs to be very clear in your mind what you can and can't do. It's got more information here about preparing for component one, use of published materials. The reason is because it's jeopardizing assessment validity, because the more we feed into AI, the more that it's coming out. And it's limiting what can be put into the test that hasn't already been put out there in a public format, is how I understand it. So that's one very important document. The other one is I actually got more information from this document, the frequently asked questions. Make sure you're reading this very carefully. it's asking the questions that you may have. I think that it's really important that you are just really secure on what you can and can't do. Um, Here's another: what it can't acceptable and unacceptable, more guidelines about where it will be. Assessors will be trained to recognize artificial intelligence, and we just don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize your score. One thing, some other ways that you can use it. If you, this is how I use it. And my daughter's in college and we're constantly having a conversation about what's appropriate to use AI for. I use AI on the regular. For example, for this presentation, I used AI to generate a paragraph for one of the activities that we did. That is a resource that was used in this fashion. That is an acceptable use of AI to generate a resource. You could use it to generate an assessment. You could use it to generate ideas or instructional strategies for the standard that you're trying to teach. And then you can, because see, eventually you're going to have to use your own brain to go into the room and teach it. And that's what I will hold on to. AI will be wonderful for creating things, but eventually you've got to get in front of kids and actually deliver the instruction. So just be very mindful about that. I'm going to, let's see, instead of doing this in a breakout room, I do want to go through this. So let's just do it. Let's just do this together. Okay. So we've got allowed, not allowed, and need more information. There are 8 scenarios at the bottom of this chart. Let's just go through this and see what you think. A candidate asked ChatGPT to suggest 5 engaging ways to introduce a unit on ecosystems. Allowed, not allowed, or need more information. Allowed. Okay. Oh, I'm not in the thing. Okay. You know what? I just saw my 1-minute warning. I just saw my 1-minute warning. So we're going to stop here. I do highly recommend that you go through and do this. Just look at the scenarios and see. And if you have any questions about them, please reach out. The other 2 activities, this is a weak paragraph. It was going to be an opportunity for you and your group to beef this up. The other one is Bobby Faulkner's 4-layer cake. So make sure that you take a look at that. You'll see that if you are anywhere on her social media. She uses that a lot. And then I want to slide back over here to the resources. Tips for writing commentary. There's just lots of things that I put on here. Writing about planning. This is a resource that was put out, published by Mississippi. Wonderful. So lots of resources there. Please feel free to use them. I am going to, Dr. Hulan has put the registration link in the chat. So make sure you go there, or the attendance link. Make sure you go there and click on it. I do hope that you have gotten some information from the session. If you have any questions or anything, my contact information is on the last slide in the presentation. I 100% support reaching out to me. I love, more than anything, Dr. Hulan will tell you, I just love supporting candidates. If you have a question, there's no question that's too dumb. Don't think that for a second. Please, please, please reach out.
I have one question real quick. You
Okay.
mentioned that your in-service center provides those books to the candidates free of charge.
Yes.
How do we find out if ours does the same thing, and how do we get them?
So the way that our candidates receive it, they attend our cohort meetings. So
Okay.
In the program that is put out today, I think it's toward the end of it, there's a link to every regional in-service center's cohort meetings, and you attend those meetings and they will provide the books for you.
Okay.
I think they're all providing them now. I could be wrong on that, but just you could ask. Good question. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate you hanging with me and doing all that writing. Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
My computer went dead, so I had to try to log in on my phone. I didn't get the link. I had to come back in
Okay.
to record my attendance, and it's not showing on my phone.
The link is not showing?
Yes, ma'am. It's only showing the messages since I logged back in.
Oh, I see. Okay, let me grab that.
Beginning to them.
Okay, there it is. Erin, thank you very much for putting that in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hope y'all have a wonderful afternoon. I hope to see you tomorrow and or Friday. If you have any questions, please email me.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm going to hang around here for a minute if anybody has any questions you'd like to ask.
Where's my list? Thank you.
You're welcome.